Now we're going to add in a couple more shifts. We're first going to start with a vertical shift. So if we have just the sine and cosine function, the center line, the middle of the graph, is at y equals 0. So essentially, now that we have a new transformation, which is going to be a vertical shift, so up or down, this is going to change the center line. So if we look at the first example, we know that this plus 3 changes the center line to be at 3. So our center line is at y equals 3. Now, the 2 in front also affects our amplitude. So our amplitude is 2. So we need to then figure out our max and our min values. So for the maximum, you take the center line and you add your amplitude. So we are going to go up to 5. And for the minimum, you take your center line, subtract the amplitude, and we're going to go down to 1. So what this means is we are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 1, we have 3, and we have 5. So I have my top line, which we are going to have, or our center line, which is at 3. Go all the way across. And then our min and max line are at 5 and 1. So this is where the function of sine is going to fall in between. So we need to identify the 4 intervals. Our period is 2 pi because we did not have a transformation horizontally. So we have pi over 2. We have pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So since it's a sine function, we are going to start at what was the origin, but since it shifted up 3, now we have a point at 0, 3. Then we go up, middle, down, middle. So our sine function looks like this. So after shifting this up, our domain is still 0 to 2 pi. And we include 0, but we don't include 2 pi because that would be repeating the same point, which we included at 0. And then our range is now 1 to 5. Okay, on B, we have a center line at -2 because we went down 2. Our amplitude is 3, so that means our max is going to be -2 plus 3, which is 1, and then our minimum is going to be -2 minus 3, which is -5. So if we graph that, we have 1, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So I have my top interval at 1, my bottom minimum at -5, and then at -2 we have our center line. So since we are doing cosine, we are going to start up at 0, 1. I guess it would help if I labeled these. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so now we start up for cosine, then we go middle, down, middle, up. So my cosine graph looks like this. Same shape that we're used to seeing, but it's just shifted down. So my domain stays the same, 0 to 2 pi. But now my range is -5 to +1. In C, we have a center line at y equals 2, because we went up 2. Our amplitude is 4. So our max is going to be 6, and our min is going to be -2. Now we do have a period change on this one. So I have 1/2 in front, so it's going to be a horizontal stretch. So my period, which is 2 pi over b, is going to be 2 pi over 1/2. And since we're dividing by a fraction, it's going to be a bigger value, so my period is 4 pi. So I have pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. So I know I need to go up to 6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Down to -2. And my center line is at 2. So this is cosine, so we start up at 0, 6, down to pi, to our center line, and then down to -2, our minimum, back up to our center line, and then up to 6. So when we connect these, once again we have a cosine graph, except it's been shifted down. I'm sorry, it's been shifted up, it's been stretched, and it has been stretched horizontally as well. The phase shift is what we call the horizontal shift. So when looking at the graph, whenever we have a value with t, so plus or minus after the t, that's going to be your horizontal shift. And when looking at this, we follow the same rules that we have before. And since it says minus pi over 2, that means we're going to go right pi over 2. So when I graph this, since that's the only shift that's done, I'm actually going to graph the original and the shifted version so that you can see the difference. So I start at pi over 2, I go to pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, and since I'm going to the right one more pi over 2, I need to include one more interval of pi over 2 at 5 pi over 2. Our amplitude is 1 and -1, and our center line is at 0. So the original, since this is cosine, is going to be up at 1, -pi over 2, -1, center up at 2 pi. So it's going to look like this. I'll do it dashed just so you know this is the old one. So if we shifted everything to the right, pi over 2, it will look like this. And since everything is labeled pi over 2, all I have to do is go over one interval. So now I'm up at pi over 2, 1, pi 0, 3 pi over 2, -1, 2 pi 0, and 5 pi over 2, 1. So now the shifted to the right cosine graph looks like this in purple. If you don't need to do the original, that's fine. Sometimes it helps, but you at least need to be able to graph the shift left or right. So for this one, my domain is pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2, and again, bracket and parenthesis, and then our range is -1 to 1, because that didn't change at all from the parent function. For B, two things happen. We have a horizontal compression, which affects our period. So my period is going to be 2 pi over 2, or I'm sorry, 2 pi over 1/2, which gives me 4 pi. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a horizontal stretch. I was looking at the wrong problem. I was looking at the next one. Horizontal stretch. And then we have a horizontal shift, and we went left pi over 2. Okay, so I'm going to first start with my period. I need to go to 4 pi. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pi. I'm down at -1 and I'm up at 1. So if I were to graph cosine, then it would look like this. Okay, but now we need to shift everything left, pi over 2. Now, since my intervals are counting by pi, we need to add in a pi over 2 interval in between all of these. So if your interval isn't the same as what you're shifting, then this is when you need to probably add in an interval and adjust. Okay, so in red I'm going to graph the actual cosine function with all the shifts. So we're going to be up at we're going to go negative pi over 2 up at 1. Then we're going to go 0 pi over 2. pi over 2, 0. 3 pi over 2, -1. 5 pi over 2, 0. And 7 pi over 2, +1. So it looks like this. Again, shifted only by pi over 2. All right, now I want you to try C on your own and see if you get what I get. So the two shifts on this function is going to be a horizontal compression, which changes my period to just pi, and then we go right pi over 4. So our original sine function would start at 0, 0, but since we're going to the right pi over 4, we go to pi over 4, and then up to 1, 0, down to -1, and we end at 5 pi over 4. So that means that my domain is pi over 4 to 5 pi over 4, and my range is still -1, 1. Okay, so next we're going to look at what you do when you're given t that's not alone. So if you read above, we have a standard form and a shifted form. So if you're given a function in standard form, like in letter D, then we need to make it in or change it into shifted form. So by doing that, we need to factor out whatever is with t because we need t to be by itself. So since it says t divided by 2, we're going to factor out a 1/2. So we're left with t plus pi. So this is the function that we're going to graph. So I have a horizontal stretch. Since it's 1/2, and my period is going to equal 2 pi over 1/2, which equals 4 pi. And then we go left pi. So the intervals I'm going to use, since my period is 4 pi, are just pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and then 4 pi. But I need to go back and also have negative pi because I'm going to shift to the left. So since I'm going to do that, I start my sine function at negative pi 0, go up, middle, down, and then I finish at 3 pi. So that means that my domain is negative pi to 3 pi. And then my range is still negative 1 to 1. Okay, so if we combine all of these transformations together, and then we're going to graph them. Okay, so looking at this first one, we know that we have a horizontal compression. Okay, so that means that my period is going to be 2 pi divided by pi over 2, which is 4. We have a vertical reflection because of the negative in front, and we have a vertical stretch of 2. We also know that we go right 1. So, since my period is 4, but I'm going right 1, I need to count to 5. I'm up, my amplitude is now up at 2 and down at negative 2. And then since it's a vertical flip, sine is going to start at 1, 0, but instead of going up, it's going to go down first. So this is what your sine function looks like with all of those transformations. If you look at the second one, we have a vertical stretch of 2, which we know affects our amplitude. We go right pi over 2, and we go down 2. So now my center line is going to be at negative 2. So if we count by 2's, that means I have a min of negative 4, a max at 0, and my center line's at 2. So my intervals are going to be pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, and then we're going to add one more 5 pi over 2 because we're shifting to the right. So since it's cosine, we start up. So we go top, middle, bottom, middle, top. So this is what my translated cosine function looks like. So the domain of this is pi over 2, comma 5 pi over 2. My range now is negative 4 to 0. And I just realized I missed the first domain of range, which is 1 to 5, and then negative 2 to 2. So now we have all of our shifts and transformations that we can put together and graph.